On balance, I would say Rogue Nation is probably my favourite Mission Impossible movie. Not that I think it's objectively the best. You could make an argument for Fallout being the peak, but personally, I've got a soft spot for Rogue Nation. I think it's got the right balance of action sequences, interesting characters, and importantly, a sense of humour. While the sense of humour doesn't disappear entirely, it's on show less and less in the later movies, and I think that's to their detriment. So let's talk about the plot. In London, Ethan is on the track of the Syndicate, a kind of dark mirror of the Impossible Mission Force, set to sow discord around the world. In a great opening sequence, we see him, well, honestly, I don't want to spoil it, but it's a great example of using the tropes of a franchise to do something different and set the whole franchise down a slightly different path. Rewatching it, this does feel like a sequence that anticipates the more serious tone of Fallout and Dead Reckoning. While, like I say, I think they get the tone right here and less so in the later movies, I suppose the willingness to change is why the franchise has lasted this long. While Ethan is occupied in London, in Washington DC, Brant and Benji, played by Jeremy Renner and Simon Pegg, get some bad news. Following the events of the previous movie, the CIA decide to disband the IMF and fold it into the CIA. So Ethan must hunt down the syndicate while the American government is trying to capture him. And I could do a detailed breakdown of the plot, but I don't feel like it because I don't think the franchise is popular because of the plotting. I mean, I think the plot here works really well. I love how the stakes slowly increase, particularly the personal stakes. For the characters. There's none of this, the galaxy isn't going to survive, resort to instant high stakes that the MCU is infected with. Rogue Nation kind of builds things naturally. The Mission Impossible series is basically an excuse for a string of action sequences, and Rogue Nation, I think, excels here in its own merits and compared to other franchises. Compare, for example, the opera scene, the computer core scene, and the bike chase. At the opera, the action is soundtracked, obviously by opera. The action itself, jumping between Ethan, Benji, Ilsa Faust and a couple of others, plays out almost like a silent movie. The occasional piece of dialogue and other sound design, but it's tense and exciting choreography, the fight itself, and the realizations on the characters' faces as things unfold. Then in the computer core scene, there's virtually no sound at all, just some rushing water and a heartbeat. In the motorbike chase, it's mostly just the sound of engines and tyres for several minutes. And Rogue Nation works so well in terms of action that the final sequence where they deal with the big baddie is actually quite low-key in comparison to the earlier sequences, and I don't really mind because it's really simple and really elegant. This makes the movie much more balanced, much more interesting and engaging than, say, The Fast and the Furious. I mean, the Fast and the Furious movies are ridiculous, and I mean that in an affectionate way. I've enjoyed the ones I've seen. Mission Impossible tries to be serious and delivers it with a huge tongue-in-cheek, and for me, Rogue Nation gets this just right. There's stuff like Benji accidentally moving pieces of infrastructure at the Opera House. There's how the members of the IMF team meet each other in Morocco, the plane door in the pre-credits sequence. Tom Hollander and his joke about Jeremy Renner deserves a special mention. There's so many moments of kind of silly fun that make the characters seem much more relaxed, much more relatable than the family in the Fast and Furious. I keep seeing suggestions that the Mission Impossible movies are just made up as the cast and crew go along, like the first Iron Man apparently was back in the early days of the MCU. You can basically make up a movie as you go along if you've got a group of people who are actually committed to making a good movie. And I think it's safe to say that Tom Cruise, the last movie star, is committed to making good movies, surrounding himself with people who can help him with that. There's definitely evidence of that in the script, in the action sequences, in the fantastic cast. Ving Rhames and Simon Pegg return, as does Jeremy Renner. This is Jeremy Renner's last Mission Impossible movie, and I think his physicality leaves a bit of a gap. I think he's missed in the next couple of films. Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames do their normal good work. Sean Harris is fine here as the antagonist, but he's better in Fallout. Tom Hollander, Simon Burnley are also particularly good, but it's Rebecca Ferguson who's the big new addition to the cast as Ilsa Faust, an MI6 agent. If you imagine a spectrum with Ursula Andress from Dr. No on one end and a joyless post-Me Too girl boss on the other, Ilsa Faust kind of sits on the middle of that spectrum. She's capable as an adversary. She uses her brain when physical power isn't an option, and she's still kind of a feminine character. She flirts a bit with Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt, but doesn't completely fall at his feet. I think I'd contend that Ilsa Faust would be a good model for movie writers to use when putting a woman in an action movie. So that's Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. The more I think about it, the more I like it. Thanks for watching.